We turn to item 4, financial motion in the name of the Treasury Minister. Call on the Treasury Minister, Mr Cannon, to move.
Mr President, this island is in and is facing unprecedented times. The actions that you have already been taken and the proposed measures before us today demonstrate that this government is prepared to take substantial steps to protect our island at this time of need. The motion before the court today seeks to fund the Manx Earnings Replacement Allowance and the COVID-19 Salary Support Scheme from the Manx National Insurance Fund. It is estimated that the two schemes could potentially cost up to £100 million for their initial operation of 12 weeks. Mr President, both I and the Council of Ministers recognise that this is a significant sum of money, but it is vital that we use the reserves that we have accumulated to protect this island and its people. We must preserve our economic infrastructure and stand ready to reignite our economy. I have given a full public statement on Monday outlining these measures and explaining why these were being taken, and I have acknowledged that the measures that we took a week last Tuesday were simply not good enough. The problem we are facing is clear. As a direct result of coronavirus, the effect that it is having on global health and the actions being taken by both governments worldwide and the government on the island, this has meant, quite simply, that our domestic economy is in danger of collapsing. Our objective is clear. We must support people and business by providing for cash flow support, either directly or indirectly, for the short term. Our strategy is combined with the health strategy, which is to suppress the virus in the shortest possible time frame. If the actions we are taking to protect health are successful, then our chances of economic recovery are improved significantly. In other words, the longer this crisis goes on, the longer, the greater and the deeper the financial impact. We are geared up, therefore, to support this nation as much as we can do to see us through the next 12 weeks. If we can suppress the virus in the next 21 days, we can potentially start to get the nation back to work in the days and weeks following in a controlled manner. So we need to support as much as we can the urgent needs of our people and economy as quickly and effectively as possible. Honourable members will know by now that these measures do not stand in isolation. A full package of measures has been brought forward to help those most affected by this crisis to try and find solutions they need to help them through the next 3 months. I want to take this time to also pay tribute to our political colleagues in Treasury and the Department for Enterprise, who have worked incredibly hard in a cross-departmental effort to determine all these solutions. I also want to pay tribute to the officers across the divisions who have dedicated every waking hour to bringing about the solutions we need and providing assistance to those in need on the ground. I must, of course, repeat to you that I do not expect every business to survive or every job to be saved, but we can and we will recover from this. I will report back to Tynwald in June with details of how much has been expended on these schemes, if indeed approved today. And on that note, Mr President, I want to be clear that the wording in the motion is as such to allow us to overspend if we need. It is not a blank cheque, and clearly I am happy to provide any such updates to honourable members as and when required.
Honourable Member Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr President. I beg to second and reserve my remarks.
Mr Speaker.
Mr President, before I begin my contribution on this motion, I want to commend the Council of Ministers for moving swiftly in difficult times to protect the health and welfare of the people of our island. They've moved forward at a pace that is organised and brings people with us, avoiding the worst excesses of fear and panic. The response has been calm, measured and well informed. And I was delighted to join my neighbourhood in a round of applause for our key workers last night, as people did around the island. And I'm delighted to say that the response of the people of Port Erin and Port St Mary could be heard well up the Howe Hill in Rushen. Like all other members of this court, I got the order paper today at 8:37 a.m. and I was shocked to see this motion for a blank cheque. A motion without a limit on it is exactly that. And I was angry when I read the explanatory memorandum. one side of A4 stating what we already knew a week ago is obvious, and there's no justification as to why we're pursuing this particular strategy over other courses of action. An hour after reading the order paper, I emailed the Treasury Minister requesting more information, and I was told to wait until the debate. Now, like other honourable members, I've been deluged by constituents fighting to stay afloat, fearful of the future. I'm under no illusion as to the gravity of the situation. The Minister will know that in an emergency, communication is key, and yet we've had nothing in the last week and a half from the Treasury apart from Monday's statement. Today we are asked for a blank cheque to spend an estimated £100 million, but the motion sets no upper limit on spending from the National Insurance Fund, a fund of £850 million that we already know is under strain in the long term to fund state pensions. We have no idea what the impact will be on pensions in the medium to long term if we support this. Now, with regards to the package itself, there are some obvious questions that I put to the Treasury Minister this morning. How many people are directly affected? How many people are in support and supply chain industries, i.e. indirectly affected? What's the worst case scenario? Does spending now impact on our ability to provide an economic stimulus when people can act more freely again and when the stimulus will be needed? What other options were considered? And what does this current scheme offer over and above job seekers allowance and incapacity benefit, and what does that premium get us? Now, I appreciate that in 10 days the Minister will not have all the answers, never mind looking at the economic recovery plan that will be needed over the coming months. I'm disappointed that that the Minister has not been more open with us and provided us with the same information that he has had over the last 10 days. I'm disappointed that the Minister has not articulated specific objectives or outcomes that he hopes this money will achieve. And I'm disappointed that Tynwald members are being given just a few hours to digest this significant issue when we could have sat tomorrow or Sunday. I don't underestimate the task that sits in front of the Treasury Minister and the Economic Development Minister. But I urge ministers to work with members, to work with the private sector and with the massive pool of talent in our community who have offered their skills and support. I just ask that these points be considered and noted. I know that these are difficult times, but it doesn't mean that we should give way to a lack of communication and a complete lack of good governance. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Treasury Minister for the way that he's approached this. I appreciate the comments that have just been made, but I think the Treasury have been quite open and engaging throughout this process, and it's been done, obviously, quickly, but I think they have done quite well to try and manage that as best they can. I would say that having been a part of this process so far, from my perspective at least, the Treasury Minister seems absolutely focused on two things at the moment. The first is ensuring the long-term sustainability of government finances of the National Insurance Fund, and also ensuring people get the support that they need to get them through these difficult times. I'm not going to say much more on this motion. I just do have one question for the Treasury Minister that I appreciate if you'll be able to answer. And that's primarily because, whilst I agree with the overall direction of travel, I'm not sure I agree with some of the detail in these schemes. The question for the Treasury Minister is this. He's developed a system of two schemes, one to support those in employment, one of those to support those out of employment. And I just want to make sure that it is his intention that nobody falls through the gaps between these two schemes, that the support will be available to everybody who needs it as a result of this pandemic. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Ayr and Michael, Mr Baker.
Thank you, Mr President. I stand to support the motion. I believe that it's a considered response to an incredibly difficult situation, and I commend both the Department for Enterprise and Treasury and their respective ministers and members for bringing this forward. What's happened is businesses across this island have been stopped in their tracks by this emergency. Good businesses that were completely viable until a few days ago. People have been thrown out of work. Good people who had meaningful jobs, who were gainfully employed, hard-working, honest, straightforward members of our community. This is a response. It's a quick response. But it's a considered response, and it consists of paying businesses to retain employees to try and keep the organisations together, to prevent the organisations collapsing into heaps of rubble, which will inevitably take an awful lot longer to put back together than they did to fall in the first place. It's prevention being better than cure. It's paying additional support in an innovative way through the MIRA scheme, a newly created benefit to those who have lost their jobs. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's clear. It's getting cash into the hands of individuals and families who need it to pay their bills, which haven't changed as a result of these circumstances. They still need to put food on the table, pay their mortgages and rents, and provide for their loved ones. We know, honourable members, Mr President, that doing those things is the right thing to do. It's an impossible request to the Treasury Minister and his team to calculate the bill that this is going to cost precisely and quantify exactly how many people are going to be affected. I put it to you, honourable members, that it's not a question of us not being able to afford this scheme. It's that we can't afford not to do this. And with this, I commend the scheme to you. Thank you, Mr President.
Treasury Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank honourable members for their response and for their support. I would say to the Speaker that his concerns are indeed our concerns in many respects in terms of the amount of money that is being invested. But my honourable colleague, Mr Baker, raises the point that many of us have felt that we cannot afford to simply stand by without taking firm, positive and decisive action to try to do our very best for those people who need it. As has been pointed out, their world has crashed. Without warning and without any form of expectation, the cash has simply stopped flowing, and at the heart of this problem is cash flow. It is very simple. People have stopped coming to the island, they have cancelled bookings, they have sought refunds for their bookings when you talk to accommodation. Hotels are currently unable to pay their bills. Other suppliers are unable to therefore receive the money that they need to pay their staff. People are being laid off. It is an economic crisis. And our strategy to support people and businesses as much as we can over the next 12 weeks is the right one. If the health strategy works, if people on this island take it seriously and stay at home and we get over this coronavirus as quickly as possible, we will rebuild. And this support that we have given and that you are, I hope, about to support today will help everybody be in a position to recover more successfully. For some, that recovery may take longer than expected. For others, unfortunately, that recovery will be extremely difficult. But in a generic basis, not to take the actions today, which are considered, which have been worked up, albeit speed, but nevertheless at considered speed, and with significant input, I would suggest, both from honourable members, officers, and indeed some members of the private sector with whom we've either consulted about the direct problems or consulted with in terms of taking an overview of the solutions that we were providing. This is the right way to do things, and none of us will know at this precise point exactly when this will end, but we are taking a considered view that the measures we are taking will support a controlled and reasonable return to, and give us the best opportunity to return our economy to some sort of model which will enable people to successfully resume their lives. The honourable member, Mr Speaker, asked me, why, people just didn't go on to the existing welfare system, why they just didn't go on to incapacity benefit and job seekers allowance, and what's the difference. I would say the difference is probably quite easily put in most cases. It's about £400 a month different, and that is really what people, as a bare minimum, are going to need when they suddenly find, without warning, without expectation, in such big numbers, that their lives are potentially turned upside down. It is the least we can do, but it is the most considered option for us, given our financial resources at the present time. And as the Honourable Speaker alludes to, we of course need to have something to take us back out, to recover an exit strategy and the support there to help people come back out of this immediate crisis. Of course, within this as well, there is a responsibility on individuals and businesses to apply their minds as to how best they can get through these next 3 months. State support is absolutely necessary, but it alone will not solve this crisis. People need to think very carefully about how they can structure their affairs to best support themselves. Businesses likewise need to think carefully about how best to support themselves. And both parties need to work collegiately together to understand the problems that are being engaged and found within society at the moment, and to try and deliver the solutions at least in the short term. And finally, I would say this, the Honourable Member for Ramsey talks about gaps in the system. I recognise that some people might not access or find themselves that they're not eligible to perhaps access the full package of support that they thought might be there for them. Some people may find themselves, irrespective of the employer's wage incentive for the £280, may find that their employer chooses to let them go. The first mechanism, the first safety net is the mirror, is the new COVID benefit, the mirror. And then if they do fall through the cracks, then the benefit system, and they of course are in the eligibility criteria, then the benefit system below that, there is that safety net just to help catch them and support them through these incredibly difficult times. And I expect, honourable members, that in 12 weeks' time, that we will have, during this period, we'll have to apply our minds as to how effective the measures that we've brought in are, how suitable they are, and what we may need to do, given what we're seeing on the ground in terms of the results coming out from the Health Department, what we may need to do next, and whether we need to alter these mechanisms that we have in place to better suit society and the challenges that individuals and businesses are facing at that particular point. I beg to move.
Honourable members, I put the motion in the name of the Treasury Minister at item 4. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.